You're listening to the Cavalier Connection podcast. Here are your hosts, Jeff Lowe, Jay Ballard, and Jack Lowe.
Welcome, another edition of the Cavalier Connection podcast. I am your host, Jack Lowe, joined as always by my dad, Jeff Lowe, and Jay Ballard. How we doing tonight, guys? Jay?
Hey, I'm still riding the high from Saturday. Doing great.
Yeah. That was a great weekend. A W in basketball, and then which meant nothing compared to what that football win was. Outstanding. Jay, I don't know what you did, who you talked to be able to have the cup behind you, but gosh,
I don't. But I really don't know what you talk. You know, this podcast tonight is dedicated to talk about that basketball win over Queens, right? That's what we're here for. I don't know what you're talking about with football. No. Hey, listen, we have a special guest with us tonight. Brad Franklin from Cavs Corner will be joining us here in just a couple of moments. But first, I want to remind you, tonight's episode is brought to you by our friends over at A Squared Pizza. Be sure to go by and get some of the best Detroit-style deep dish pizza you can. Call 434-465-2186. Again, that's 434-465-2186. Or you can place your order online on their website. Hey, they got great pizza. And hey, with the Who's in Charlotte, if you can't make the trip, that's the perfect place to get your pizza from to watch the game Saturday night. A late one, 8 o'clock, but they'll certainly be open serving pizza. So go check out A Squared today or whenever you may need your pizza. With that being said, really quick, before we get to Mr. Franklin, we have our Mentors Moment of the Week. And listen, I got a couple things. Number one, obviously, no Cam Robinson. He didn't play, so we don't have to worry about him getting it again. But you had a very wide selection to choose from this week. Because normally, you have one, maybe two plays to choose from. Listen, Virginia shut out the Hokies. Was not close, so multiple options. We decided to roll with this particular play from a quarterback who used to play at TCU in North Texas, and he ended up in the Commonwealth making this play on the Virginia Tech defender.
Morris the key. Got away from Stevens. Put in the ground. Chandler Morris.
So for our listening audience who may be listening on Apple or Spotify or whatever, what just played here, the video of Chandler Morris taking the quarterback keeper, absolutely juking a Virginia Tech defender out of his shoes and just walking into the end zone. Chandler Morris, your UVA quarterback, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great play. It was the end zone at the end we were sitting at. And that's when I really felt, even though 3 possessions felt huge already, the way the defense was playing, and it was really out of reach. When it hit 24-0, I started thinking, okay, let's run this thing up. and the fourth quarter was just fun. The defense was hunting. Virginia Tech, got that one little cheap touchdown at the end, but never a threat. Just never a threat. It was never a competitive game, and that's the first time in my life that I can remember. I know we beat them like 38-0 in 80-something, 89, 88, which I would have watched, but I just don't remember it. So special night for everybody involved with the program, the players, the coaches, the fans, the families. Just a special night for everybody.
Dad?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, we've been burned so many times. You just feel like, oh, God, is something going to happen? And when he scored that, it felt like the game was definitely over, even though Virginia Tech, their offense didn't sniff anything all night long. They got lucky for one touchdown late, but they weren't sniffing anything. Kyron Drones, we're living rent-free in your head, buddy.
So this episode isn't about us tonight. It's about Brad Franklin. We're going to get his thoughts in just a moment, but I just want to mention this before we get to him. Kyron Drones, 4 completions, 3 if you take away the touchdown. What did he have? Like 76 passing yards, which, by the way, if you take away that touchdown pass, that leaves him with 20 to 30-something passing yards.
21
passing yards. And then
he did complete 2 other passes. You got him.
Well,
two to a Virginia player, just the wrong uniform.
You're right, but okay, so you want to make it 6 completions. 6 completions for Kyron Drones, 2 to the wrong team. Their offense went 8. Oh, I'm sorry. They went 3 and out 7 times in a row, with the 8th one being an interception. Hey, we're going to get to our man, Brad Franklin, but just know, as the kids like to say, this game by Virginia, VTA, Virginia Tech. Where you at, my man? Where you at? All right, joining us now from the Cavs corner, Brad Franklin. Brad, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good, man. How about yourself?
Really good. Appreciate your time tonight after quite the night Saturday night. For those
Did
of
something
you
happen Saturday night? I'm not sure. What are we talking about?
Yeah. There's a reason why we have a podcast tonight, including you. And I noticed, you got the Virginia hoodie, you got the nice tagline under your name.
Yep.
I mean, I'm really liking the vibe I'm getting from you right now.
Well, it's just funny because I as somebody who with the last name Franklin, the idea that your name would be tied to the school that you've grown up disliking your entire life, it's not fun, guys. It's really not fun. We have jokingly referred, because like we used to have a bit on our show that I took to Twitter a lot, where like when they had Armand Franklin, I called him Cousin Armand. I would just do it and I would just I would literally say it like it was real. And I just committed to the bit and I just stuck to it. Matter of fact, at some point his mom said something to me about like, I don't know if we're kin, but we should be, or something like that. But no, it's been an interesting week between the James Franklin piece and obviously UVA getting that win Saturday night. Probably the least stressed I've ever been watching a Virginia Tech game. I don't think I was I didn't have a chance to be stressed. I mean, essentially, dude man brings it out of the end zone. They get a tackle. 3 plays later, or several plays later, at least there's an interception. UVA scores, and it was, the route was on. It was, again, it was probably the most enjoyable Tech experience I've ever had, for sure. I figured it up the other day, and I think, Jack, I told you this in the press box, but I figured it out before that game. I've gone to 29 Virginia Tech games in person in my life, and I'd seen them win 5 times. So now we are at 30-6. And let's hope we're putting a run together. Let's just say it like that.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. I like to complain that I've seen them before this weekend only once, and then I heard that I'm like, well, I hadn't seen them play that many times. It's brutal, but we knew going into the game that Virginia was the better team. It was all psychological. It's right. The logo. Did it surprise you the way that Virginia played Saturday?
I wouldn't say it surprised me the way Virginia played. I think it surprised me how bad Tech was. I've watched Tech several times. It's kind of a guilty pleasure of sorts, especially if they're going to lose. Exactly. I'm the type of UVA person where if Tech is losing really bad, I'll turn it off, because either they're going to lose really bad and I can get some sleep, or they're going to come back and I don't want to watch that. Right. And so I was just really surprised by how bad Tech was. In my time covering college football, I genuinely cannot think of an offense that looked as bad as that offense looked the other. I just woefully inadequate in every way. I don't know what they were trying to do. I don't know what they thought their strengths were, how they were trying to cover their weaknesses. I felt kind of bad for Drones that's the way it sort of ends for him, because it was just bad. And I think the more I watched Tech, the more I was like, wow, Virginia can actually sort of put this thing in neutral a little bit, because you don't even need to do anything special here. You really just need to play your base stuff and be super vanilla in a lot of ways. Now, defensively, I thought Virginia was strong. I mean, not having Cam Robinson's a problem, right? And I thought Marcellus played extremely well. I love that when he went out and they brought Caleb Hardy in there, he made plays. When Marcellus came back, made more plays. Would have loved that shutout for sure. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think I was more surprised that Tech was as bad as they were, and certainly was very impressed by the way UVA handled this. I mean, I have long been, anybody who's, read my stuff over the years, listened to the podcast, I mean, I've always lamented the way that I thought Virginia handled this game. I always thought they handled it wrong, which was they wanted to play the whole, this is just another game. And I would go down to the game, to the field pregame. And I mean, some of those Tech teams, they're just they are just completely off the chain. Just the exuberance and the excitement and just the raw emotion. You could just see them warming up and you're like, man, this is not going to be good. That was just not the case with this team. The way they handle each game, knowing this was something that they were working towards and they hadn't earned anything. I just loved the way Tony framed this thing all season long. I love the way he approached it. I love the way the guys themselves approached it. Certainly I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see the cinematic recap from this week, but just really impressed with everybody around the program and how they handled this game going in. I think there's a lot to be said for this is the blueprint for how you have a run, how you start a new streak for Virginia in this case, just in terms of not just the talent on the field, but also in terms of the way, you mentioned sort of the mindset. I think if you took everything about Tech and you put them in Wake Forest jerseys, maybe that's not the right comparison this season, put them in anybody else's jerseys, right? It just does not invoke the same feeling.
Exactly.
That was an effort Saturday night to make you think like they could do that again. And I'm just really impressed by them. And like I said, just kind of, man, I was expecting Virginia to have the better team. I didn't realize Virginia had the better team by that order of magnitude.
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about that rivalry where obviously Virginia Tech has dominated for the last couple decades. We're hoping that it's moving in a different direction now under Elliott, but with Franklin coming in, is there something to be said for you want it to be a good rivalry at the end of the day? Even if Franklin's coming in, you want it to be two very good teams as opposed to just us building a streak on it. Obviously, we want to win, but what I'm trying to ask is isn't it better for the state that both programs are at a very good state in a top 25 kind of matchup that we used to see back in the 90s or whatever?
Yeah. Listen, I got no problem with Virginia Tech being top 25 when Virginia beats them each year, right? Like that's fine by me. I do think though that it's good for the ACC, it's good for the state, it's good for pretty much everybody involved, right? That these two teams are good, that they are routinely good, that the games are good. I would love to see a situation where the in-state players are opting to stay home.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of benefits to that, not necessarily just because like it's going to benefit the school that I care about or whatever, but it's also, I think, just sort of fundamental, right? If you are insert name of player here who isn't at such and such high school in the Richmond area, and you go to Notre Dame or you go to Penn State or wherever you might go, it's not to say you can't have a good career. You certainly can, right? Travion Henderson, for example, right? He showed that you can have a good career, set yourself up for the pros and that kind of thing. But there's so many other situations of guys who went that far away from home, did not have the type of experience that they could have had, didn't have the support structure that maybe they might have had if they were a little closer to home. Family could see them a little more often, especially now that NIL sort of levels the playing field at least a little bit in terms of maybe the exposure that you might get. Right now, you have real agents who are working on your behalf to be able to, to not just get you deals, but also sort of get you in a place where when you start looking at the next level, you're able to sort of do that. I do think it's good for certainly for the ACC and whatever the ACC ultimately is in the long run. I mean, that really remains to be seen. But for now, yeah, I mean, I see, Virginia Tech doing a nice job in the last, week or so, flipping recruits that had previously committed to Penn State. Certainly feels like there's a little bit of an NIL share situation there where maybe Tech is able to offer them more than Penn State was because of the way the allocations are working for Virginia Tech in this cycle. And I think they're using that to their benefit, right? Having seen UVA, kind of put together an incredible roster that was able, I mean, if you think about the number of injuries that Virginia was able to withstand going into the season, it's actually kind of crazy. And I remember, this time last year or shortly thereafter, right, when the portal opened and they're, you're like, do they really need another tackle? Do they really need another defensive back? Yes, they absolutely do. And I think, if you're Virginia Tech, you're doing everything you can. The difference I think you see in right now is as somebody who works for a recruiting network or a network, college sports network primarily focused on recruiting, it certainly is interesting to me that at the same time that one school is pulling a whole lot of, flipping a lot of 3-4 star kids, I just don't know if that's necessarily, I don't want to say helpful because it is helpful, but I don't know if it's fundamentally the same as it used to be, right? Recruiting not that long ago, high school football recruiting was such the lifeblood of your program. And I know, it's everybody knows that the, NIL portal has changed a lot of that, but I don't know if folks are really appreciating the degree to which they changed that. And I think Virginia is a great example of that, right? What Tony Elliott and his staff did was they took the resources that were given to them by some extremely generous and forward-thinking donors, right? And they made extremely good use of it, right? Think about the number of guys they brought in and the way that those guys have meshed. It's actually kind of sad that this is going to be the only iteration of this team, because I would love to have seen what this team looked like, a year ago. Right now, granted, you change one thing, it's like it's like the butterfly effect. You can't have this group if they're all not upperclassmen having experienced the things that they've experienced to be able to come together with the vision that they had and the way they bought in. But I see Virginia Tech bringing in a lot of really good high school players. Will they still be there in 2 or 3 years when those guys can really contribute? Right? Are some of these guys going to be forced to contribute right away because of the sort of expectations they have coming in? Maybe. It's going to be I think that transition is going to be tough. And if you're Virginia, it's also going to be tough because Tony and company, regardless of how the season ends, they're going to have to go out to the portal and they're going to have to bring in a whole brand new roster, right? Offensive line is going to be brand new. You're going to have a new quarterback situation. Likely you need some more skill players. You're going to have to bring in more linebacker help. You're going to get more help basically it's going to be a new roster. And you want to be able to sort of mesh that with your high school guys, younger guys, maybe even who have come in the portal who are going to stay. But for Virginia this year, certainly, and for Virginia Tech going forward, how they answer those questions ultimately will dictate what this rivalry looks like. I think for right now, Virginia clearly has the upper hand, and we'll see how long that stays in place.
Hopefully it stays in place for a while. And there's so many conversations to be had. Once the season's over, we got to wait till Virginia's eliminated or they win a bowl game. There's going to be so many conversations with the roster turnover or whatever. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
For sure.
But looking at this back half of the season, one big talking point, especially after the Wake Forest loss, was the play calling and Des Kitchings. Mm-hmm. Over the last couple of games, I really haven't noticed as big of a problem. Just what are your thoughts on him all of this year? And I mean, do you think there maybe needs to be a change towards the end of or after the season, or do you?
I don't think so. I mean, listen, the offensive coordinator is the modern day backup quarterback, right? Everybody backing, I remember being in my seats in 120 as a kid, everybody called for Mike Groh all the time, right? We won't grow. That's just the way this works. The offensive coordinator is always going to get the lion's share of the blame, and very rarely will he receive the lion's share of the credit. I think Des has had a really good season. I think he's definitely had some spots, and I've been vocal in both the good and the bad, right? The first part of the season, especially when he had a lot of the pieces to play with, I mean, that he was on one. I mean, he was really doing a nice job. The calls were super. They all felt like they were notes coming from the same piece of music, right? I think that after the first bye week, it felt a little bit like maybe they did a little bit too much self-scouting, right? Too much self-evaluation. They're going too much against Tennessee. And they got into a little bit of a rut there for a little while where I would, for my own personal whatever, that I would say that there were too many times where he should have gone with what his tendency was, but he went against it. And then there were also other times where he was a little bit too reluctant to do that. And it's almost like the methodology was right. You just need to flip the application to the different situations. But I do think that, the last few games, the Wake Forest game, I think was tough because that matchup wise and the way that game, it just felt like that was the only time this season where things were just a little off, right? Even the first play of the game, right? A bad exchange and the ball is on the ground, right? Those were just not the kind of things that happened to Virginia this year. And you think about all the injuries and the guys going in and out and stuff. It's a wonder that it didn't happen more. But I do think Des is a better play caller than most devout fans would give him credit for, in large part because, like I said, I think he gets a lot of the blame, but not necessarily a lot of the acclaim. I thought the finally throwing the pass out of the direct snap was beautiful. I hate that injuries made it so that's not a lineman catching that, because it's the idea of a lineman catching a touchdown pass against Virginia Tech is just too, but no, I think Des is fine. I think he's shown this year that when they have the type of quarterback that they need, who will make the plays that they need to make, even with skill talent going in and out, right? After they lost Dak Twitty, the offense was different, right? After they lost Xavier Brown, the offense was different. And he's kind of had to reinvent it a couple of times. And I think that's extremely difficult to do. And I think what we saw in Durham, and certainly what we saw Saturday night. I mean, Virginia Tech's offense is pretty bad. That defense is talented. It's got some issues on the back end, but that front seven's really good, especially that defensive front. And I actually thought Carolina, they would probably kind of do a lot of what Carolina did, trying to throw off timing and get more physical right at the line of scrimmage. And I mean, Virginia just didn't allow it to happen. So I think Dez is going to be. I think Dez is going to be fine. I don't think they need to change anything other than continue to get him the type of players that they've got on this roster. I mean, I think that the skill sets and the way things fit, I do think that they need a quarterback who can move. Virginia's offense is just a different animal when Chandler Morris is able to run. I think there were times this year where maybe they protected him a little too much, maybe probably boxed him in a little bit, told him not to go. Certainly given his own injury situation and everything, that makes total sense. But yeah, I think Dez is fine. And like I said, I think I'm hopeful that they'll continue to bring in talent like they've got on this offense, because I think that fits both the overall methodology of the offense in terms of scheme, but also in terms of him, what he's looking for as a play caller. I think it fits pretty well.
Yeah. So was there a point in the season that you began to think this team was capable of being this good?
Oh, that's a good question. The Florida State game was an eye-opener just simply because it was a big moment. And, of course, at that time, we didn't realize what Florida State wasn't going to be. I definitely think that, the way that they kept winning these close games were just not the way Virginia teams react in those games. And that's not a shot at any other Virginia teams, but that's just this luck. They kind of created their own luck a lot. The Washington State game where it's too close and they still managed to come out on top. And then the Cal game. I don't know if I could put up a specific spot on it. I do think, though, that the time when I really appreciated how good Virginia was the way that they played in Durham. Because if you go back to like game week that week, right? At least for me, I know I was going into it thinking Duke's offense is really good, right? And so we're going to need to score a lot of points. And I knew Duke's defense was soft. And so I'm like, all right, can we score enough points to keep up? Because even if you can, you have a drive here or there that you force them to three, and that's an offense that doesn't typically make a lot of mistakes. They're good at catching you in a bad run fit. They're good at catching you looking in the backfield a little too long. They're good at catching you with a trick play or a little gadget here or there. The way that the Virginia dominated that game and just made that thing beat them down so quick, that's when I really appreciated how good they were. I think before that, I thought, all right, well, they're finding ways to win games, and that's great. And of course, at that point, man, the conference was such a topsy-turvy, who's here and who's there. But coming off of the Wake loss, to be able to go down there and do that, I thought was extremely impressive. And certainly that to me was the time where I was like, okay, this team is for real. Not just in terms of like what they can do this season, but certainly in terms of the way I look at the whole picture. Granted, look, Ohio State's extremely good. India, I'm not trying to say Virginia's a top 5 team. I do think Virginia's in a top 12 sort of situation. And I think that if you look at a playoff situation, I mean, this is the fun part of sports, right? You never really know what you get until you play the game. Maybe they lose by 70 and maybe they win. This is not 2019 where you were just really glad to go to the ACC championship game, even though you knew you were going to get absolutely blasted. This is a very different animal. And I think that Duke game is when I was like, all right, this thing is for real. And I think they're really going to do it.
Yeah. And we had a lot of close cardiac calf moments this year throughout. And then, like you said, losing to Wake Forest, but then that Duke win and then, blowing out Virginia Tech. You think Virginia is back on track right here at the perfect time?
I think so. I think that think about how many Virginia teams you've seen that lose that Wake Forest game and never recover, right? When they have the opportunity to be really good and everybody gets excited and people are starting to come back and seen, right? I do think that given the injury situation where they are, I want to know what's going on with Mikhail Boley's ankle. I would love it if, they could figure out some way to glue Cam Robinson's ACL back together in a hurry. But I do like the way that the defense has responded even without him. I mean, that's the thing that it really, if you think about it, blows you away. Cam Robinson played 3 total snaps, right, against Duke. It's either 2 or 3. I think it was 3. But less than 5 snaps, right? And they dominated a very good Duke offense. So now I think they are. I think they're kind of hitting their stride. And I think confidence is interesting, right? Tony Bennett used to say you gotta find guys you can lose with. Well, Tony Elliott has found guys he can win with. And what I found really interesting throughout this whole season has been the way that like they don't respond the way typical Virginia teams do. And a lot of that is because they're not a typical Virginia team. These guys have not been like, they're used to being whatever they were at their previous school. Now, maybe their previous school didn't have the kind of success they wanted, but they didn't bring any of that sort of stuff with them. It's like they all came, united on a specific pursuit. And it's been just a joy to watch them. So I do think that, as they've gone through a lot of these trials and tribulations, this is, I think, easily the best Virginia team I've ever covered. Certainly is the most versatile. The fact that the defense is kind of sneakily, because it wasn't that, felt like the beginning of the season, man, the defense had a lot of work to do. And now that they're pretty nasty. And I mean, I do think the Virginia Tech's offense is bad, but a lot of that I do think had a lot to do with Virginia just being pretty good. And as you look forward, you look at the matchups and such, who's to say that they can't go to Charlotte and win? And if they do that they can't go to whether it's Ole Miss or Texas A&M, whichever one it is, that Ole Miss game, because of everything going on down there with Lane Kiffin leaving and everything, it feels sort of primed for an upset sort of situation. I'm sure Vegas would look at that and say that's an 11 or 12 point game.
14.
Is that what? Yeah. So it's interesting to think that Virginia could be in a spot where they're playing their best ball and still be a 2-touchdown underdog on the road. But at the same time, like I said, that's why they play the game, right?
Yeah. And I don't want to speak for Jay, but I can tell you after the Wake Forest loss, as Virginia fans, as long as we've been burned so many times. It's like, oh God, we're going to lose the last 2 games of the year.
Yep.
And then they came out and just beat the brakes off of Duke. And then of course, beat the brakes off of Virginia Tech. We're not used to seeing that.
No. And that's not, and like I said, I've watched a lot of Virginia football in my life, right? It's just not normal, right? To have those demons of the past creep up and then be able to swat them away so effectively. I was super impressed with, like I said, not just the way they played, but the way they handled everything. Tony said that, Virginia, the Florida State game, that, the way that the guys handled it during the week gave him a lot of confidence going into the game. I think you could say the same thing about Duke and the same thing about Tech. And I do honestly think that a lot of that comes down to him and the way that he and his staff have handled it. Early on in his tenure, I think, especially the way things got started right after he took the job, and there was so much angst in the fan base. And there was, at the time, it's a weird transition time because not a lot of people were ready, a coaching change, right? You're either really, really bad, right? And you're welcoming change because you need something different, or you're really good and you're hoping to keep going. Well, he was, Bronco leaves and it's kind of like in the middle somewhere. It's like the guys themselves, they didn't feel like their culture needed to change. They felt like they were fine. Fans had gotten kind of used to Bronco and all his weirdness and the fact that, you never really know what the dude's going to say or how, whatever. And so like fans were kind of in a place where it was like, well, who is this dude? And then there was a whole lot of like Clemson Cavalier stuff going on. And like, there was some angst about that he has righted that ship, especially through the tragedy at the end of the 22 season. And that he has been able to, to keep guys on his staff, that he hasn't had a lot of turnover, that he's been able to build this thing to do what he did to bring in the talent. And certainly this year, man, those kids have completely bought into it. It's super obvious when you watch him. It's super obvious when you see him. And then, Tony himself, I feel like he's a different person now than he was when he took this job, whether that's related to the tragedy in part or in full. I who's to say? I just know that in terms of the way he's connecting with players, it's very obvious to me that this is a Virginia program that's just different. It's different, not just on the field in terms of, to your point, getting the results that they got in that situation, because Virginia teams just don't do that, right? But to be able to do that and then have the guys be bought in the way they have, it's pretty remarkable to see, and certainly a lot of fun to watch unfold.
Yeah, for sure. Is there a position group that surprised you the most this season?
Well, you start the season without Cam Robinson, I'm nervous. You end the season without Cam Robinson, I'm nervous. And the fact that we got to see some of the plays that kid made while he was healthy, it's incredible to me that you could have, which probably was going to be the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, his single plays changed the outcome of ball games there in the middle part of the season, right?
Yep.
That the linebacking core was able to sort of just kind of push through, that they were able to, whether it's James Jackson just being a stalwart there, whether it was Marcellus being able to step in, I just think the linebacking group as a whole, both with Cam and without Cam, I mean, this really does sort of underscore the amount of talent there. I think the defensive front, though, is probably the group for me that I knew there was a lot of talent. I was curious the way it would come together. And I say that because, you know, in a typical 4-3, you have guys who play certain roles, and you can see some of that come out, you know, in terms of packages and, you know, oh, it's this, you know, it's 3rd and short and this is what they're going to do, or, oh, it's 3rd and long. So you got to get the NASCAR package back in there. I just think that their overall skill set was higher even than I thought they was going to be. But I think that the way they put that together was super impressive. You know, we can talk a lot about Cam. You look at the tackle numbers, and, you know, Neal is doing that, or even Ethan Mentor's flying all over the place or whatever. But I do think that front is probably the position group where I think they had the best sort of application, so to speak, of the overall skill talent. Like, they were good, but they were even better because of the way, not just they were used, but the way they performed. And so it didn't really matter who was in the game. It felt like, whether it was, you know, Holmes coming off the bench. I mean, that kid's motor, he's got so much Aaron Faumui in him that it's hard to not see. I just really like that defensive front. I think that's probably the group that surprised me the most. Not because I didn't expect them to be talented, because I did. I think because of just how versatile and how much they even raised the bar beyond where I thought they would be.
Yeah. So Saturday we got Duke in the ACC championship, chaos in the ACC. 7-5 Duke earns the right to play us.
Yeah.
Do you think it's tough for the team to play someone you just played and blew out?
Yes.
Well, would you rather have seen them or an SMU who you played last year but you haven't prepared for? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, Tony said this week that, you know, you kind of have to throw a lot of that out. I think that's a little coach speak. I don't think you throw a lot of it out. I think that a lot of the work that you put in sort of preparing for them helps. Now, the trick is that you've also got film of your guys against them. And so some of that's good, some of that's bad. Now, for Virginia in this game, this matchup, a lot of it's good. There's a challenge that comes with that, though, which is you have to convince your kids. And I don't spoiler alert, I don't think that's going to be a challenge for Tony Elliott with this group. But you have to convince your kids, you know, they're human, right? At the end of the day, they're people. We're all thinking the same thing, which is like, we just saw you beat the brakes off of them, right, you know, 37 seconds ago. Right. Go do it again. You did it on the road in Carolina. Go do it again on the road in Carolina, you know. But this is going to be different because now their motivation has changed. Duke got Virginia coming to them in a game that both teams needed exponentially to be able to reach their goals. Oddly enough, they both still got there. But, you know, Virginia was coming off of a loss where they didn't look all that great. And if you're Duke, you probably weren't expecting to get the buzzsaw that you got in Wallace Wade that day. But now, you know, you approach it differently. So I do think that this, you know, I'm a big fan of the idea that sometimes cliches are true, right? They're cliches because they're accurate. The idea that it's hard to beat a team multiple times, I think that's accurate. And I think Virginia does have a challenge here, which is they already kind of put together their best shot to beat Duke. Now they got to do it again. And they got a lot of the stuff that they would like to do based on personnel, based on matchups, based on tendencies. They already did that once. So now you got to like reinvent the wheel, knowing that the other team knows exactly what your counters to their counters were. Right. So the question is, what can Virginia do without losing sight of itself to be able to go out and do that? However, I do think that the confidence of this team seems to be, it's not, I think for a little while there, they were in these cardiac calf situations and they got used to waiting for somebody else to make a play. And then that Wake Forest game, nobody rode in to save the day, right? These last two games, they figured out how to do it as a group. Everybody does their part. And I'm really curious to see how Saturday night plays out, in large part because I have a tendency, I'm not going to say that Virginia's going to beat Duke the way that they beat Duke in Durham, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them win this game comfortably, not because I don't think Duke is any good, but because I think Virginia is actually better. And certainly the last couple games have shown me that I have every reason to think that. I'm a big Missouri guy, right? You got to show it to me, and Virginia's continuing to show it to me, and I'm pretty confident about the Hoos down to Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking Vegas doesn't build casinos for free, you know, and they put the line at 2.5, and I'm thinking, is that easy free money for people if they go lay it on Virginia? You know, of course, that's when you get burned when you think that. But yeah. Is it just Mensa that scares you the most about Duke, or if not him, what else?
I don't think I don't think they did a lot in that first matchup to sort of maximize their potential, right? It felt like the Barcade kid wasn't super involved very much, and he's a tough matchup. I didn't think Virginia did a terrible job on him or anything, but I also didn't think that like they did a whole lot to. I think Duke it just didn't feel like Duke was really trying to do a lot to try to get him the ball. It's almost like they sort of thought it was just going to happen. I do think Mensah was a little bit all over the place in the game. He's got to be much cleaner. I also think that Virginia's offense right now, especially with some of the different dynamics that they've got, I think right after X went down, I think they were struggling to figure out how they can still get the ball on the outside. And I think that's honestly, I didn't really love a lot of the like passing around the line of scrimmage that they did against Tech. I thought, one of the things against what I've found to be a pretty talented defensive front is you don't want to telegraph where the ball is going to go. There was that one tunnel screen that I thought kid was going to pick off and take back to the house. Because the ball it felt like that ball was in the air for like 30 minutes. But no, I don't, it's not so much that I'm not worried about Mensah. I am. I just worry for Duke's side of this. If like, can they stop Virginia enough? I mean, it's funny because in the first game I was worried, can Virginia score enough points? And now I'm like flipped it. I'm like, well, can Duke actually stop Virginia enough? Now, what happens if the offense, if this is another game like Wake where things just aren't working right? And it starts to get that's when the ghosts of the past sort of come creeping in. It's not like for us, it's like, oh God, now here we are again, losing the football. But for them, I think it is very much like, oh, how do we stop momentum going in the wrong direction once we realize, oh, yep, it's actually going in the wrong direction. And that, I think the way that looks is if Virginia comes out and not only can they not stop Duke, but then they, for some reason, can't do what they need to do against Duke's defense. I mean, at the end of the day, Manny Diaz typically has pretty good defenses. And I think Duke is, I don't know how it happened, but they had a pretty decent NIL situation. They've got talent. How much of that talent they're able to sort of put to its potential, I think that's the trick. And I think that first game, they didn't do a good enough job of that on offense. How that game ended, I think if you're Duke, you probably came away from that game thinking it was closer than we think it was. We find out Saturday night how close it actually was. Whether they got kind of back in this because Virginia was trying to sort of take its foot off the gas and there was just happened to be a lot of time left, or if Duke's actually better than what it put on the field. I think it's probably a little bit of both, but I still think Virginia has the better team and certainly the better talent level and is playing with like I said, a ton of confidence right now. I think that matters a lot, especially for this group.
Yeah, so not to look too far ahead, but say Virginia does take care of business Saturday. We kind of talked about it briefly if they get to that playoffs, and right now it would be Ole Miss, I guess, who they'd play, or A&M, as you mentioned. Do you think Virginia would be outmatched if they do make it to the playoffs completely, or do you think they could compete?
No, I think they compete. I think the fun part about that is, when you go from being the team that is kind of surprising people through the season to then all of a sudden you're the number one seed, or the pressure is on you to win games because you got to go where you got to do this and you control your own destiny. And to then all of a sudden now you're the plucky underdog. There's some freedom in that, right? Yeah. They played with so much game pressure and situational pressure that then to be in that situation and all of a sudden you can just play free. I think that's a gift. I think that everybody would overlook Virginia because that's just the way it works. The talking heads will overlook anybody who's not the SEC. I think that's one of the reasons why I don't pay attention to talking heads, which is kind of ironic because sometimes I am one. So I think that Virginia absolutely will compete. Now, that's not to say I would expect them to win, right? If they're going to go to College Station. I don't know, man. But I would expect them to put themselves in a position to make enough plays to force Texas A&M or even Ole Miss to make more plays to win it. Right. I don't think Virginia is going to go out there and just sort of sleepwalk through it because they're just happy to be there. I think this is a different group. Like I said, in 2019, it was very clear to me that Clemson was just a different animal. Yeah. This is not that. And the idea that you can win the ACC championship game Saturday night and earn the opportunity to do something that's never happened in school history, that's not just like, that is a program changing sort of situation. And yeah, you could absolutely go down there and upset either, whether it's Texas A&M or Ole Miss. I like the Ole Miss matchup simply because I'm really curious to see what that team looks like, especially with some time. after the coaching situation.
They have their
changed.
own reality TV show going on over there, as we
Yeah,
mentioned.
exactly, and they really do. So I'm curious to see what they look like, at that point, with that much time. Like, how hard is it going to be for them to sort of, rally the troops, get them all focused on actual football again, especially while they're fielding calls. We all know that they or their agents are going to be fielding calls from coaches in Baton Rouge, right? But anyway, either way it goes, I think Virginia will represent itself well. Whether or not they win, I mean, ultimately, just making the college football playoff is a huge step in the right direction for the program, for the coaching staff, for the players, and certainly changes the equation. So yeah, Saturday night is by far the biggest. It's the biggest game easily in Virginia football history.
Yeah.
Simply just because if you win that game, you lock up a spot and you do something that your school's never done. And yeah, absolutely, you can go out there and upset somebody and make a little noise and watch the world just freak out because the ACC, like that would be just the tip of the iceberg. Now, there's a lot that's going into in the playoff in a lot of different directions, right? There's so many different coaching changes. There's so much turmoil. There's also the fact that signing day is as we record this tomorrow. And so you're talking about the portal and everything coming up soon. And there's just a lot going on. Right. So, I go back to it's as simple as why not Virginia? They got all the pieces that you need. If you think about it like in the old school NCAA tournament days, right? The plucky, nobody, you didn't expect so-and-so to do this, right? How many 8-9 seeds have you seen go through the Sweet 16? You're like, wait, what? And then they get to the Elite Eight, and you're like, wait, what? I mean, even the Syracuse team that beat UVA in 16? Like, they were not a very highly seeded team, but they were super talented, and they had all the ingredients. So Virginia right now, they got a really well experienced, sort of multi-dimensional, multifaceted quarterback. They got really talented skill position guys. They got an offensive line that kind of figures out a way. Doesn't matter who seems to be playing, they figure out a way. Defensively, they're in a groove right now. I mean, there's a lot of reason why, if you pointed to a team, if you're trying to put a team in a lab together to be able to pull off a win like that in that sort of situation, this Virginia team kind of fits and checks off a lot of those boxes. So like I said, why not UVA? I think like I said, if they can get this win Saturday night and make it there, I could absolutely see them making some noise. It'd be a lot of fun.
Yes, it would be so much fun. So let's just say, let's kind of change gears here. How would you feel about the national championship ring ceremony being in Brazil for the opener next year? What do you think about the game being in Brazil?
Well, let me tell you what, if that comes to pass, it'll be the most UVA thing ever that they inadvertently scheduled a game or allowed a game to be scheduled where they open the season in Brazil. Listen, I don't have the heartburn over this that some folks seem to have. Yeah. I think that, this is an they got the extra home game promised to them, right? And that's all that really matters at the end of the day to me, is that, this is a cool opportunity. It's a fun chance for them to go out and do a thing. I don't think it'll deflect much from anything. I know for a lot of people, it's very much like, why? And I get that, but also too, there's going to be, it is an opportunity to do something, that is extremely cool. And also, I think you can sell it to your players is like, basically you get like a free bowl game, like an experience right in the beginning of the season. Yep. I'm a little bit curious in terms of like how it all works, logistically with trying to get your team ready to make that trip, and then you get home, and then you got to get ready for a game. What that looks like. The bowl game is different because you do all the craziness and then you just go play it and boom, it's done. Right. You don't have to play somebody else after this unless you're, I guess, in the college football playoff. So I don't have the heartburn over it. I think it's, it's very much, WTF, but at the same time, it's kind of fun. I think the kids will probably enjoy it. Of course, the downside is that whatever fans are going, I mean, they're spending an arm and a leg to do it. But I do think the school makes a pretty decent amount of money, and I wouldn't imagine that they would do this if they couldn't. The one thing I think we need to keep in mind, and I don't know if this is just me being a TV nerd or not, but I noticed in the news release it mentions that it'll be on an ESPN platform and that streaming options are still being sort of determined. I'm curious what happens, because as it stands right now, the conferences all of its rights go to ESPN, and ESPN dictates where those games go and how those allocation of funds are. That's not necessarily the same when it comes to an international audience, right? There are plenty of places where, oh, in the United States it's this, but in international it's that, right? So what happens if that is actually different? Now, I would imagine it's not going to be like off ESPN's platform or not through ESPN somehow, but I'm just curious what those dollar signs might look like. And maybe we're talking apples and oranges. Maybe it ultimately isn't that many more apples, but it could be in some ways advantageous for the school to be one of the ones to take a shot on this. And it's kind of like when UVA's name started popping out when they were talking about the basketball, what was the players era tournament and all this stuff. And Virginia's name popped up. People were like, wait, Virginia? I think Virginia's just open to these possibilities. It's like the better version of, hey, let's go and play every team on the West Coast from many moons ago, right? I'm good with it. Like I said, I don't have the same heartburn about it. At the same time, like I said, as long as they get the extra home game and they're not losing anything, quote unquote, to do it, I'm all for it. And if there are more opportunities like this to play random games for a little bit extra cash and an experience, hey, why not? Should be fun.
I mean, Brad, is Cavs Corner, do they have the budget to send you?
Absolutely not. No, listen, as much as I love going to games and no, absolutely not. We will not be in Brazil unless a donor wants to float Cavs Corner's specific ticket to and from. That will not be a thing that happens. We will be, as I say on the podcast, from the palatial Franklin Estates in the West End of Richmond. That's where we will be covering that game, unless some entity decides otherwise. No, that is not in the budget. Not today, not tomorrow. No, even if they win the national championship year, that's not going to change.
The last question, and I know it's early in the week, so but do you have a final score prediction for Saturday?
Yeah, I think the Hoos win by like 10 or 12. I feel like Virginia's the playing the better football. I think you could say Duke sort of backed into this a little bit, and I know that sounds like a slight to them. It's more about everything that had to happen for them to even get into the conversation, but I do think they earned it, and I do think Virginia's going to have to play well. I think Duke will play better than they did in Durham. I think the familiarity piece will probably tend to favor Duke early because, like I said before, people are just human. It's natural once you've beaten somebody to expect to just beat them again. But I do think that eventually talent will win out. And like I said, I think that Virginia has the more talented team. They have the more cohesive team. I think mentality wise, they are really driven and they're not shaken very easily. And I think ultimately Virginia's offense is, even if it's not early, they'll get going. And I don't have a doubt that they can outscore Duke in this kind of situation. Now, can they outscore Ole Miss or Texas A&M or Ohio State? Now, I'm not going that far, but in this situation, I think Virginia's been the best team in the ACC all season long, and I think Saturday night the Wahoos are going to prove why.
Brad, we really appreciate your time. Tonight, we're just trying to prepare your sleep schedule for tomorrow night. We got a really late basketball game, so that's why we decided to record so late. But hey, let the people, our listening audience, know where can they find all your stuff with Cavs Corner and everything.
Yeah, so Cavs Corner is the UVA site on the On3 Rivals Network. Check us out at cavscorner.com. Follow us on Twitter at Cavs_corner. Great place for in-game updates, the content items, and the occasional witty banter.
There you go. He's the best, Brad Franklin. Brad, we really appreciate your time, and have a good night. Go Hoos, all right?
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Yep. That's going to wrap us up tonight. Mr. Brad Franklin, our thanks to him jumping on. Guys, any thoughts, Jay?
Oh, yeah, I love Brad Franklin. I love the Cavs Corner guys. Great podcast. Go check them out. Man, I just think I thought about this Saturday night. The guy who donated the $100 million, he was sitting somewhere in that stadium Saturday night, and he had to just be looking at the field like, this is why I paid the money that I paid. This is worth every freaking penny.
Yeah.
To just dominate Virginia Tech. Dominate Virginia Tech in every way, shape, and form. And just to see the Karen on Facebook and Twitter and everything, flipping the bird and everything. And then just the people around us in the stadium, the way they came in, I mean, just chanting like they were a 9-win team and we were a 3-win team.
Yeah.
Just to shut them up. I mean, we've been doing this podcast for 2 years actually, yeah, over 2 years now. We hit the 2-year mark like last week. We probably should have done something for that 2-year anniversary.
We did. We beat Virginia. The team took care of that for us.
Yeah, that was a celebration. But I mean, like I just thought about that guy, and I'm so thankful for him, and I'm thankful for all the donors, because without them, you think about where we were a year ago right now after the Virginia Tech game, the lowest of lows. Calandria's out. There's controversy. Is Des Kitchens going to be fired? We hope so. Big eyes there. We were wrong. And I'm just so excited for the program, and Tony's clearly got the team believing that they can do anything, put no limits on what you can do.
Yeah. Dad, any thoughts?
All right, Jay hit the nail on the head. Them bastards were walking up the steps chanting "Let's go Hokies" before the game, looking at us. And I had to get to "Let's go Wahoos" chant, but I said, "No, sir, not tonight, not tonight." We're here. We're here to win.
You should have seen these two guys in the bleachers. I mean, you would have thought that police were going to show up any second for my dad or Jay. I mean, I don't know how they made it out of it. No, I didn't.
Well behaved. We were well behaved because there was nothing to be misbehave about. It was a blowout. I was just waiting to see. I was just sitting back and going to see if some drama happened elsewhere in the stadium. It won't go be me.
There was a couple times it was very early too, so I was a little worried when Jeff started talking about Virginia Tech education to the guy from Virginia Tech. I was a little concerned that it could get ugly.
You just gotta go ahead and set the mood for the night. Let them know you're dealing with me all night long.
As I told Jeff, we just need more Virginia fans willing to go to jail. I'm not one of them, but we need some.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's plenty of them in the stadium. It just wasn't us.
Yeah,
it just wasn't y'all. Yeah. Well, that's gonna wrap us up tonight. Again, our thanks to Brad Franklin. Go check out his stuff over on the CavsCorner.com and everything that he's got going on over there, and go follow him on X, of course, at Cavs_corner. That's gonna wrap us up tonight. Hey, we got plenty of stuff coming out later this week. More articles on the CavalierConnection.com, as well as a lot of content. We don't know exactly when, but I know for sure I'll be at least going live after the basketball game Saturday. It's going to be a fun day Saturday in Charlotte. You got UVA basketball playing Dayton inside the Charlotte Hornets arena. I'll go live after that, recapping that. And then you walk across the street to Bank of America and the ACC Championship. And if Virginia wins that, we've got some very big things to talk about after that. I'll go live after that regardless. So we've got more stuff. Just be on the lookout on the YouTube channel, The Cavalier Connection, as well as we're on Spotify and Apple now at The Cavalier Connection, and the website, of course, thecavalierconnection.com. Follow the X. It's new, kind of, at Go Who's Podcast. With that, that's going to wrap us up tonight. Go Who's.